I was the director of training and development for the Atari Corporation in the late 70s and had quickly gained the reputation that if training was needed, I was the best source available. One day, the VP of product development came by my office and told me that he was very concerned about the level of creativity within his organization. He said, "Brad, Atari must have a continual stream of new exciting products, or we will ultimately watch other game developers pass us by. We need creative people to develop our games. And recently, we lost the best we had when David Crane and Alan Miller left to start Activision." David and Alan left because the parent company, Warner Communications, and the CEO of Atari, Ray Kassar, didn't see them essential to the company's success and treated them like piece workers. At one point, Kassar said, "Anyone can create a video game. It's no more difficult than weaving a rug." He, not surprisingly, treated the video game product like a commodity and not the creative endeavor it was. This was despite the fact that Warner Communications owned Warner Brothers movies, Warner Records, and other businesses dependent on the creative energy of talented individuals. Earlier, I had become interested in a new counseling technique, neuro-linguistic programming, NLP, because I thought its concepts could be valuable within the training and development profession. I was quickly drawn to the original process used to develop the technology. Richard Bandler and John Grindler, B&G, were curious about why some counselors helped people after a very few visits, 5 or less, while others had little impact after many visits, weekly for a year or more. It seemed obvious that the effective counselors were doing something different, something that was having a significant impact on the patient. But what was it? They interviewed both the effective and ineffective counselors to find the answer. This was a frustrating experience because both types of counselors described their methods in much the same way. Worse yet, the descriptions were nebulous, lacking the specifics needed to determine exactly what was making the difference. It seemed obvious to B&G that neither group knew what they were doing. The ineffective counselors didn't know they weren't competent, while the effective counselors had no awareness of what it was they were doing that made them competent. The former were unconsciously incompetent, and the latter were unconsciously competent. B&G decided to observe both groups to see if they could determine differences in their approach. After getting permission, they videotaped a great variety of counselors, both effective and ineffective, as they counseled their patients. After analyzing hundreds of hours of videotape, they identified a number of specific techniques being used only by the effective counselors. While they had no idea why these techniques would make a difference, they decided to teach them to ineffective counselors to see if they became more effective. They did, and NLP was born. In my opinion, creativity is another ability where people can go from being unconsciously incompetent directly to being unconsciously competent. This is true for most intuitive skills, skills we learn as an infant, like walking and talking. However, in this instance, it was my responsibility to teach others this skill called creativity, and I was having trouble identifying what it was specifically they needed to learn. Most books I read on the subject were either nebulous about the process or cutesy, providing little exercises to help us learn how to think outside the box or express the freedom to color outside of the lines. In my experience, these types of exercises had no long-term value and didn't enhance the individual's basic potential for creativity. In fact, for many, these exercises convinced them that they were not creative. The exercises actually had a negative effect. I thought I might be able to use B&G's discovery process or something similar to get a better idea of what creativity was all about. So I contacted the NLP organization to see if someone might be available to work with me. I was introduced to a young associate of theirs, Robert Dilts. He is now considered to be the world's foremost expert on NLP. Robert and I worked extremely well together, and he was also very curious about this thing called creativity, and therefore was willing to work with me during the discovery process and the development of the resulting workshop. It turned out that even though creativity was another skill individuals tended to be unconsciously competent in, creative people tended to talk about what they did somewhat differently from those who weren't particularly creative. So we decided to use an in-depth interviewing process to uncover the specific differences. The question was, can we determine what creative individuals are doing differently? And if so, can we pass those behaviors on to others, thereby increasing their potential to be creative? During the discovery process, we were able to determine a number of different behaviors. However, the most interesting discovery was that creative people had different beliefs regarding creativity, what it was and how it worked. Then we developed a creativity workshop where we taught the unique behaviors those individuals exhibited and shared their beliefs. This workshop was very successful and resulted in a significant increase in creativity within the game development area. However, the arrogant ignorance of Atari's executive staff, especially Kassar, demanded development schedules that greatly hampered the creative process, which ultimately resulted in the crash of Atari. Over the years, I have often used what I learned during this time to increase the creative potential of people I have worked with. In fact, I give much of the credit for my success to this learning. And while it was important to learn what creativity was, it turned out to be even more important to discover and pass on what creativity wasn't. Thank you.